Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Made to Shine. You are in for a treat today. If you've seen all the social, all the stuff I've been putting out before this launch of this episode, we have the beautiful, amazing, and talented Carlie Dill with us on today. You guys, I'm so stoked. She is 21 years old. She's a baby and she's done so stinking much. And she lives in Los Angeles. She's from Waco, Texas, and she's a film producer, founder of Zeal Studios. And what I think strikes me so much about you, Carlie, and why I really wanted you on Made to Shine is your faith. What I noticed about you is you're someone that puts your faith in everything that you do. And you just talk just how much on your social about how much you love the Lord, how much you believe we all have a purpose. We're all made to shine a light in dark places. And that's what we're here to do at Made to Shine. It's to remind people of that. And specifically this notion that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you have a ministry. I don't care if you're a preacher or not. It's like your ministry is how you live your life. It's how you go to your teaching job, how you go to your marketing job, how you go to your relationship outside of church. It's outside of the church walls, how you live your life. And you do that. And I see that in all that you do with your relationships, friendships, what you're doing with Zeal. And so I'm so excited today to just talk to you, to dive in more, and to really get a good feel for the value we can bring our listeners on how they can replicate that. So thanks for being on.
You're too kind. That was too kind, but that's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, so excited to have you on. And we have to kick this conversation off with the way I kick off every single Made to Shine conversation, which is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, okay, that is like so hard for me because obviously, like, I will try and do something that is less cliche than a Bible verse. I think the Bible, but go read the Bible because that is where the best quotes come from. But something that my pastor from back home told me a long time ago, and he might not have been the originator of this quote, but he might have been. I went to Harris Creek in Waco, Texas, and Jonathan Pluta always said that faithfulness isn't based on the outcome of things. And so I was always encouraged that, when you're faithful in life, it's not based on, the number of views or the number of people that get saved or it's not based on numbers or analytics, but it's based on, you look at Job and it could go all wrong. But that doesn't mean you were unfaithful. And so I think that faithfulness is just based on like you following the Lord, not on an outcome. And that always resonated with me. So.
Oh, I received that. That is a word and I once heard my pastor say from Elevation Church, like very similarly, our job isn't outcome, it's obedience. And just as you were mentioning, and I think that goes to just the fact, I think people are so quick to judge their situation as good or bad, and the outcome is good or bad. And it's like, God is doing it all for good. Your job is just to stick to the process.
Yeah, it's good.
And you've obviously done that in your life with what you're doing, what you're building, what you're creating. But I have a speculation you didn't come out of the womb just ready to conquer the world with all these ideas, and it didn't go easy peasy lemon squeezy. So talk to me, Carlie, like you do social media management, you do photography, you do production. I mean, what is kind of the story? What are the important pieces of your story growing up to give our listeners some context as to the woman I'm talking to?
Yeah, so I am just a random girl I was born and raised in Austin and Waco. I went to Baylor University for a couple years. I always said I'm not creative. I was not like the girl that came out and was like, I want to make movies, or I want to do this, or I draw. I couldn't draw to save my life. I couldn't sing to save my life. I had no like talent per se. And if you had asked me what I wanted to be 10 years ago, I would have told you the president of the United States, a lawyer, an astronaut. Like I would have told you, something in politics or just something completely different than what I'm doing right now. I was not a believer. I was not raised in a Christian home. Parents got divorced at a very young age. I'm actually adopted. So like parents adopted me and then parents were divorced. And so it was like a very interesting life upbringing. And I actually got my faith. I came to faith as a senior in high school. And it literally just changed everything for me. I got out of a long-term relationship, and the day my boyfriend broke up with me is the day I became a believer. So he broke up with me to follow Jesus. He found Jesus at Baylor, and I was like, who could you love more than me? And I realized that I fell in love with the same guy he did, and that guy was Jesus. So I like went into college at Baylor, and I thought still like I'm going to be the lawyer, I'm going to be the president. I knew sign language. I was like, maybe I'll do sign language. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but something big, something important. And I went to Baylor, and my first day of college, I cried, and I just said, Lord, I feel like you're calling me to ministry. I just feel, and I had barely been saved. I had been saved like couple months, like maybe like 1 to 3 months, like so new. And this was like a little 17-year-old girl trying to figure out her life. And I changed my major and became a religion major. And from that day, I thought I was going to work at a church. I was like, I'm going to work at the church. Like, that's for sure what's going to happen. I found a church at Baylor, got in community group, like found someone to disciple me, and like just like dove headfirst into like following my faith. But like I had every belief that I was going to be like not a pastor, but like be in the church in some capacity, maybe youth, maybe kids. I wasn't sure. And then long story short, when the pandemic hit, everything changed. It was like the pandemic hit, and the need at the church was video. It was like, we don't have a way to minister. I was in the youth ministry at the time, and they were like, we don't have a way to teach the students because they're at home, and we need somebody to edit videos of us talking about like doing our weekly youth group. And I was like, I'll edit video. I don't know how, but like, I'm not doing it. It was COVID. Nobody was doing anything. So I was like, I can do it. Like, I'll figure it out. And one thing led to another. And that was just the beginning of what turned into me finding this whole world of like what being creative looks like. And then it doesn't have to look like I thought it did. And thought I was going to finish at Baylor and go work in media at a church. And again, this whole time believing like I was going to do church ministry, like that was what I was made for. As much as I love church ministry, I think there's a place for it. I quickly learned that I ended up going to California for an internship at Saddleback Church, again, thinking, hey, I'm going to work in the church, but hey, I just like wanted to get out of Waco. I'd been there for a couple of years since the pandemic. So in 2021, I moved. And I, thought like, let me go do a media internship. This is, maybe they'll give me a job when I get out of college, like, Saddleback, Rick Warren, big church in Southern California. And that summer, the Lord just opened my eyes. I had never been in a place where, and I loved my life. For context, to back up, I loved the life I had. I had the best church, school, life, sorority, friends, roommates, the whole thing. It was a dream. I was Baylor poster girl. So like me not going to Baylor was not even an option. And I ended up moving to California for the summer, like ready to come back. And the Lord just 180'd my entire life. I was still, following my faith, but he just showed me a need for Jesus here in California, that there was just an undeniable difference of like, hey, this place needs the Lord and like needs believers. And that was just something, and they don't need me, but I was like, in Waco, not everyone's saved, but there were so many faithful people that I was like, man, am I being the most faithful staying here? Like, I just don't know, not to say I couldn't, but I was like, am I really? And so that summer I talked to my community, and by the end of the summer, with lots of counsel and lots of people who came to me and were like, we really, like all my community, my mom, my family, my friends, my life group being like, we really think you moving to California is like what's next for you. And that just like, that was the start of the rest of my life, really. It felt like, so yeah, it was pretty crazy.
To me, so many things stick out about that. But what I want you to talk about specifically is throughout your journey, it was so clear that like you heard from God, you felt those messages. I mean, when you fell in love with him from that like initial, like fall in love with the Lord to then continuing to hear him. What does it feel like for you to hear from God? How do you know it's him?
Yeah. I think like when you look, and I love the verse, it's like, the sheep knows the shepherd's voice. And I am not somebody who, it's not a cloud in the sky. It's not an audible voice necessarily. But to me, I love people a lot. The friends in my life are very much like family. So I'm very particular about who I let speak into my life. And for me, I get this sense, and then I always check with like 3 of my closest friends, and I kind of have like A couple of those people, they've changed, but two of them have really stayed the same. And then that third one, kind of depends on what season I'm in. And I really trust the people in my life, and I believe they know me better than I know myself, because they're outside of me. And when I get confirmation from, 2 out of 3 of those people, and I have a feeling, I'm pretty much like, this is something I feel led to do. But I'm also a really big proponent that me moving to California is the best example of this. God didn't like write in the clouds, Carlie, move to California. Like, that was not in the clouds. I felt like I had a choice. I felt like sin wasn't involved. I had the option. I could have stayed at Baylor. I could have stayed at Baylor and been faithful and gone back there and done that. And the Lord would have used it and had a plan for me. Or I felt peace that I had the option, that I had this other door that I could walk through. I had a front door and a back door, and they were both right. They were both going to get me to the car, but it was like, which way do you want to go? It's up to you. And I just made the decision that I just see this door and I just think that's the road I'm going to take. And now seeing where I am, I can't imagine not having stepped through it, but I know the Lord would have been faithful, either like that faithfulness not being based on the outcome. It's like, no matter what happened, I really had a decision, and I had a choice, and I just picked, and the Lord's been faithful. So yeah.
That's so amazing. To echo everything you're saying, I do believe like God gives us inklings, and then he uses our community to affirm those inklings. And I even had a situation like that today where there's been something I've been praying about, and someone said it, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's so crazy. I've been thinking about this for days. And don't you love moments like that? But I love to put it as, sometimes you have to move on a maybe. Like, maybe this is what God wants me to do. I don't know, but I know I feel pulled towards this thing. And that's always my litmus test is, do I feel pulled towards this thing, or do I feel like someone's pushing me into this?
Good.
And if I feel pushed, I know it's not, because that's not peace.
Yeah.
I don't feel peace about it. And I just think about what for you, because it's one thing to dream dreams. It's one thing to write Zeal Studios on a notebook and write it down for days and think, manifest it and all this stuff. It's another thing to actually execute on building. And I feel, just from talking to my network, that's where a lot of people are. It's like they feel like God called them to do something. They feel like God called them to be a wife, to be a mom, to build a business, to run a store, but they don't act on it. They don't move towards it. What do you think was the difference for you in dreaming this up and then actually doing it, like acting on it?
Yeah, I'm with you. I meet a ton of people who have these big dreams, and are like, oh, one day when X, Y, and Z happens, like, I'll do that thing. And I don't know what it is. From like a very young age, I've always just like been like very ambitious and enjoyed accomplishing things, and moving the ball forward. But I think really it's who you surround yourself with. Like, I just mean that. I mean, you are, people say it best, like, you are your 5 closest friends, and who you're around in like directly shapes you. And I saw a podcast that said, if you work next to somebody at a job who is better than you, your work actually improves by like 60%. And if you work next to someone who's worse than you, your work actually decreases 30%. And it's not about, or it might even be flipped. It might be 60, it might be 30% and 60%. Like, you decrease dramatically. And so who you're around directly impacts. And so I have been so fortunate. And the reason I knew moving here was the right thing was the Lord just has blessed me with the most. And I know we all have good friends, and maybe I'm biased, but my friends are phenomenal. They are Jesus loving people with big dreams who have moved from all parts of the country, and we all ended up here, and we are all on mission for Jesus, but we're all building so many different things. And watching them do it made me feel like, no, it's totally possible. And moving to California, we don't need to get into it, but I had a year that was really hard, and it was like, it wasn't the right decision. I don't know. But then like, I started praying and asking the Lord, like, God, like, if this is actually what you have, like, I was like, do I move home? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this was the right decision. Cause like I said, faithfulness wasn't based on the outcome. It wasn't a great outcome at first. I was having a really hard time. And the Lord just answered that prayer so intentionally. And I prayed, I was like, God, I need people. Like, if you want me to stay here, like, had such a hard time finding a church and community. I said, I need community like yesterday. So, like, I need you to provide right now. And I'm giving you this last semester. It was like, I'd been there 6 months. I said, I'll give you 6 more. And depending on where we're at. And I mean, within a week, like, I went to this one event, met my now best friend. Her name's Jay, met the entire friend group. That's the day I actually met my now boyfriend, and then all of his roommates. And just like the Lord was just so quick to answer that prayer, that to answer your question, like, who you're around deeply impacts you. And I would not be doing anything productive towards my dreams if I didn't have people before me pushing me because they've already done it, So yeah.
So good. And I think that one of the reasons I love that you articulated it that way is because I think, people in their young 20s, like you and myself are in, it's friendships a lot of times are quantified by, do you have my back? Do we hang out a lot? Can we have fun? But it should also be, do you make me better? Do you push me? Do you challenge me? And sometimes they are doing more than you. And it might be uncomfortable for you, but it will make you better. And I do want to go back to something you said about, that year of you weren't sure if you made the right decision, because I don't think that's talked about enough. How when you walk in faith and you say, God, I think I heard you, I'm going to do this thing. Sometimes you go through a season of crap. Did I make the right decision? Like, I mean, whether it's for you moving across the country, I know in my personal experience, sometimes it's been with like relationships. It's like I felt God saying, it's time to leave this. And I did. And I was like, crap, did I make the wrong decision? And I think people believe this false pretense that it's this linear progression. You're going to answer God, everything's going to be great. So, Carlie, what did you do in that season to keep going, to sustain? I know you said you asked for it, but it sounded like you didn't just ask, but you expected it. How did you have the faith to expect?
I think it was that moment, like what we talked about. It's, I have never seen, like, obviously there's been seasons like that year where I felt lonely and wasn't sure, but there's never been a moment that God left me high and dry, like his track record is perfect. And so there had never been a time when I was like, God's not going to come through this time. Like, remember last summer when he didn't show up that one time? Like, man, I hope it's not. No, like, it's never, that's never happened. Not, and maybe there's been a season where, I haven't been as close to him or didn't hear him as clearly, but never has he let me down or led me astray. And so I just knew. I was like, God, and I also knew I had come. This is what I don't think is talked about enough, is people always are like, well, what if I move, or what if I take that job and it's horrible? Then you move home with your parents and you figure it out again, or you get a serving job and you work at a restaurant for a year and it's 1% of your life, and you then get up, you do what you have to do. Some people don't have a home to move, that's fine. You get a serving job and you get a really crappy apartment and you make it, and you get some roommates and you make, like, it's like, you find a way to make it work. You are not going to end up on the street if you don't want to. Like, it's really low. It is a really low chance that you really aren't okay, and that you have no one to help you. So that's always my advice, is like, the Lord is going to show you where you need to go if you let him, if you allow him to lead you. But also if that, that outcome is not what you thought it would be, you go back to the drawing board and you say, God, maybe, this was to train me. What do you have for me next? Is it here? Do I go somewhere else? And you go back. I had a friend, one of the most faithful believers I knew in high school, the only believer I knew in high school, was a huge part of me, getting in community right when I got saved. And she moved to LA a year before me. And she, again, most faithful believer, greatest girl ever, good friend of mine now. And she had not a great experience. She was super lonely. She couldn't find community. It wasn't for her. She moved back to Texas. She got a boyfriend. She's getting married. All is well in the world. It's like that, her moving here wasn't wrong. It just, it's like, hey, God was kind of like, maybe that wasn't it. Let's reevaluate and let's figure it out, So that's
Oh
me.
my
Yeah.
gosh. It's so true. I think going back to our job is not outcome.
Yeah.
What you
Yeah.
initially said, our job is not outcome. We have
Yeah.
got to break up with outcome. Let it
Yeah.
go. And one of my favorite kind of self-development teachers, Brendan Bouchard, says people don't understand. We're so afraid of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And I think we do this in faith. It's like, I don't want to make the decision God doesn't want me to
Yeah.
make. It's like he redeems
Yeah.
everything.
It's good.
He redeems it
It's
all.
good.
And no matter what you do, whether it's the wrong decision or the right decision, remember, our job is not even to judge the outcome. So God decides what's right and what's wrong. What we see as really crappy situation, God could be like, there is my layup. Here comes the dunk. You never know.
Yeah.
But to that being said, like, regardless, the next step is always the same. Whether the wrong decision or the right decision, the next step is to show up as your best self. And that means we're like honoring God, honoring the one who defines the outcome. That doesn't change. And so I just think that's so good. And when we think about what you're doing in your work at Zeal, everything else, how do you bring your faith to your work? I feel like faith, a lot of people leave it at church. They leave it on Sunday. It's like a Sunday morning faith, not a Monday morning faith. And they don't bring it to the corporate world. They don't bring it. You can't talk about that. So how do you do that? And have you ever experienced kind of any backlash for how you do that?
Yeah. It's such a good question. I think, being from the South, it's like I didn't have a ton of, and I didn't have a ton of training on this. And even the people that did talk about it, they're amazing people, but a lot of them have been in the church for a long time and the world has changed. Okay. The world is very, 2023, Los Angeles is not the same as a 2002, Austin, Texas. It's just we live in a different world. It was hard. So when I moved to LA, the Lord was so kind. I was here for a year, had a hard year, moved like 50 miles north, closer to LA. I was like in Orange County, but it was in California. It was like, this is the new start. I was ready to wait tables, was ready to do the whole thing. The Lord provided. It's a crazy God story, but ended up getting a full-time job at a really large YouTube channel. And we started really small. We've grown. I've seen the channel nearly double in size, millions of subscribers. I've personally produced like 100 million views of content at that channel and just seen it explode. And then this was right. I just moved out of that job, but ended super well. But it was hard because I was one of like 2 believers really there, 2 or 3, and some other people figuring out their faith. But, and it was one of those things that I realized, and again, this is something I wrestled with all year. As one of the reasons I left. Again, we ended on great terms. They know this. It's like there was some content that I didn't feel comfortable producing anymore. And I'm also I'm not holier than thou. I'm not here to say I never produced a bad piece of, no, like I did produce some things that I was not proud of, that I had to look back on, and we were going so fast and rushing so fast that I was like, hold on. And when I had a minute to like look back on what I was doing, and I asked the Lord, like, and a good friend of mine, again, I don't know if who she got it from, but my friend, Gabriella Odom from Waco, told me, she said, I never want to be entertained by the things that Jesus died for. And I was like, wow, like that is so good. And I, for the first time, was like, I am enabling entertainment for what my Savior died for. And I will no longer do that. I can't. And you don't even realize sometimes in those moments that you're doing it, you just don't know it. And it's the little things. It wasn't like I was out there making, really bad, adult. No, it was like the little things. It was like, oh, we kind of broke the law to make, that prank video. Like, are we sure? Like, and it's like, it's the little moments that it's like, this might not be on the surface, like wrong, but how we got there, I just could not believe it. I felt wrong. And some of the content itself was like, I don't think I'd show that to someone. I don't think I can encourage somebody to watch that. So I was like, you know what? I just don't think. And so the answer to that is, I think you have to be willing to give up everything. I think, the Lord rewards us in our faithfulness. And again, it's not based on the outcome, but I do believe that he sees our faithfulness. And I think we have to be willing to give up everything, if it means our job and it means our house and it means our income and it means all of these things, if he's not being honored. Because I wanted to stay there. Like they were my best friends, some of the closest people in my life that I still deeply love and care about. And they will like, they're people that will sit at my wedding, you know, be in my life forever. But it's like, this is not faithful of me. And that is a hard realization to have. And I think we have to ask ourselves, like, are you compromising for your benefit, you know? And at that point, we have to make a decision that, like, and the Lord didn't say, like, you need to quit your job. But again, it was that confirmation of, like, the people in my life and me feeling convicted, all these things were like, I know this is the right decision. And I really I just made that. I think we have to, and a lot of people will talk about it, but it's like, you have to be willing to make that decision. But I also will say it's a lot easier said than done, because there's a lot of people who are not, you know, in a financial position to do that. And I would say, again, it's being humble enough to say, I will wait tables before I will entertain myself with what Jesus died for. I will, you know, do anything else, anything to put food on the table before I'll, and you know, and I also think I think the Lord hears, and I have already seen the Lord's faithfulness in my transition, and I feel confident that the Lord will provide for the people in that position too. So, yeah.
Amen. It's you've got to know your boundaries.
Yeah.
And you've got to know, and I always say too, it's like,
Yeah.
you know when you're doing
Yeah.
something that, because it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it stays with you. If you're having to ask yourself more than twice, is what I'm doing the right thing, then it's not. Because I look back at every quote unquote right, if that's even the right adjective for that, right thing, in alignment thing I've done in my life, for what it's worth. And I never had to ask myself the question, is this right? I knew that it was right. And so why do we feel like we get to ask ourselves the question when it's wrong 1,000 times before we obey? And, you know, I think, like, looking in my own life, holding the different roles that I've had, it's being willing to be different. And I always tell people, like, because I also, like, I do this, I write books, I hold a tech sales job, and it's like going into the office, doing ministry looks like not slapping someone's head with a Bible and screaming scripture at them. No, it looks like being so kind and loving and forgiving in an environment that is anything but, that people are confused by you. And they want to know, what does Carlie know? What does Annie know? It's having this unexplainable peace. And then also standing firm in your boundaries. Like, I've been asked to go to events and do things for things like that I've had to say no to because of my morals and my standards. And was there probably gossip about it? Sure. Did it earn me the highest seat at the lunch table? No. But you have to, you know, it's like, am I in this or am I not? Because you either, you know, like Jesus said, like at the end, he'll say, like, oh, get away from me, I never knew you. It's like, knowing him is a relationship. Are you in this relationship or are you not? So I love that. And I love everything you said about that. And I think it's so pressing for especially young women as they embark in their careers. And I just think it's so important to remember, it's like, it's how you live your life. It's standing firm in your boundaries and not apologizing for it. I'm curious, you don't strike me as someone that has these tendencies, but were you ever a people pleaser? Did you ever struggle with that?
Oh yeah. And I mean, I think we struggle with this all the time. Like, especially in LA, it's very like, who you know gets you a lot of places, and where, you know, what room you're in can really change your life. Like, it really can. But and what I was going to say is, it's not even knowing your boundaries, but you have to set I learned, because I didn't do this well, and I had to set my boundaries when I was already in it. But you have to set your boundaries before you're in it, so that you know. It's like in a relationship. It's like in dating, right? It's like you have to already know what's across the line. So when you get to the line, you're like, oh, I already know. And I didn't really realize I needed to do that, because I had never been exposed to it. And I did not realize I needed to do that in my workplace. And so I got over the line. And again, I'm like you, we know, but there's also a moment, if you're going, sometimes you're so deep in it, you're like, you don't even realize how deep you're in it. And you're like, okay, wait, I crossed this boundary and I didn't realize it. And now I have to, like, overcompensate on the back end, because, if that makes sense. So I think it's knowing before.
I Could not agree
Yeah.
more. It's like if you don't set your boundaries, someone else is going to set
Yes.
them for you.
Yes.
And they're not going to be
Yeah.
intentional. They're not going to be aligned with what God told you. I also love the analogy of like when you go hiking or you go into the woods, you look at the map before you go
Yeah.
in. You know what I mean? It's like you don't just go in like, okay, we're gonna figure this unless you're Bear Grylls and can see maps in the ground with the dirt or something. But for regular people, like you look at your GPS before you go in. And I love that analogy because it's not about living life perfectly and staying on the trail all the time. It's about knowing your markers.
Yeah.
So when you get off course, you're like, oh wait, I'm off course. I need to get back, and I know where to get back to. It's a lot harder to do that when you haven't identified those markers because you could be off course and not even know it.
It's
And
so
not
good.
So I love that. And I know you're passionate about talking about this, and I want to make sure we have time to talk about being a Christian woman, running a business, and being in a relationship.
Yeah,
because it's so funny, which is another reason why I wanted you on. I recently did a lot of like polls for my audience as to what they want to talk about, and relationships is top of mind. And something multiple women and I myself struggled with in the past was how you can feel confident as a woman in Christ, business, but also have like a super successful relationship because I think sometimes people think I can either be really great as a woman, as a wife, as a girlfriend, or I could be focused on my career and crushing it at that. So how do you do both? Is it possible?
Oh my gosh. I'm just like, if you're not able to do both, you need to really reevaluate everything. Because again, being from the South, like I remember I always thought I had to work in a church or be a nurse to get a husband. And I love you guys. I could not do anything without my nurses and my church workers. I'm not
I love it.
dogging those people. I love you guys. But like, I really believed, I was like, if I am not in ministry or a nurse, there is no shot I get married. There's just like no shot. And if you had asked me, and again, so I'm dating somebody right now. He's amazing. We're like 6 months into dating, so we're still figuring it out. But like, he is somebody I never would have thought like, oh, I hadn't dated seriously really at all when I was in Waco. I like would have, but I never found that person. Yeah, I was very, have these big dreams, but you like want to do this. And I was like, I just don't know like if our lives are going to align. And I really didn't know. I wrestled with like, am I called to singleness? Like, am I like, I don't know. Like, I just thought that was like you said, my only option I had to pick. You can have both. Like, I'm so passionate to tell women that, guys, like, you can follow your dreams and they don't have to be your partner's dreams. They don't have to be your boyfriend or girlfriend. And this goes for guys too, like, but also like you can also be a faithful girlfriend and wife and mom. Like the way I describe it is I want to, build a company. I want to make a blockbuster movie. I want to maybe still work in politics. I want to go to space. Like these are the dreams that I have. But if the Lord asks me to, and I think I'm going to have both. I feel very confident. But if the Lord said, hey, Carlie, I need you to stop and pause that because I need you to be a good mom right now, I would give it all up. It goes back to that idea that you have to be willing to sacrifice it all. So like if the Lord says like, hey, if you feel like, hey, right now I need to be here right now, that doesn't mean your dreams go away, but like you have to be willing, like if, your kid gets cancer, you got to be ready to do that. Like that's something that you have to be willing to say, hey, I'm still willing to give up everything for, my family, but like 9 times out of 10, you can have both. And I'm a firm believer. My boyfriend is amazing. He is so successful, so talented. He travels all over the world as a videographer, editor. He's edited for some of the biggest people. But I remember when I left my job just a couple weeks ago, he told me, he was like, I am so proud of you. Like, I believe in what you're doing. Like, he was my biggest support. Like, he was my biggest fan. He still is, but he is like the person, like next to my mom, like he's the person who's like, you're gonna do amazing. Like, I'm so excited for you. He flew back to see me like my first day of freelance. There's all things. And it's like, your person somebody told me this, like your person either makes you, like either gives you, you go from 100% to 200%, or you go from 100 to 50. And, that's like in friendships too. Like our whole community, he has the best roommates. He has the best friends. I have the best roommates and the best friends. And like our communities together have just shown me what's possible. Like I know I am going to be more successful having him in my life. And that I can almost promise you he will be more successful having me in his life. And I don't say that pridefully. I say that it is a like thing that we do together. And I just don't believe that women have to choose. I believe that you can and are called. Every woman has a purpose. Being a wife and a mom, if that's a desire, that is a deep desire, a deep, deep desire of my heart. But it is not the only desire of my heart. And so the Lord has given me those other desires that I believe we all have. There's totally some of us who are called to be single moms, like totally. And that is awesome. But I don't think most of us are. And the same way I don't believe most of us are called to work at a church. I think most of us are called to be in the world and to be a light in the world, because that's where 99% of non-believers are, So that's my hot take.
So good. Oh, I love it. Yes, give me all the hot takes. I love that because it's so true. It's like it's not an either or, it's a both and. And to kind of reiterate what you were saying as to how, you're going to go through seasons of life where maybe God is calling you to focus on one more than the other. Someone once asked me the question, like, is there such thing as work-life balance? And I was like, no, there's not such thing as that. It's work-life flow. Yeah. It's work-life harmony. Like there's some days you're going to crush your job. There's other days you're going to spend hours with your butt at the beach in the sand. And you need it all, but it's the same thing with relationships. Like there's some seasons you're going to be really career focused. And then there's other seasons you might have 4 kids under 4 years old, like my mom did. And she like was running wild. I think maybe, and this is me spitballing here, I think maybe the reason people ask that is because we assign romantic relationships in our society and money in our society the role of God. And so you can't, there's only one God. And when you look at, other things as playing the role of God in your life, you can't serve more than one God. So you will start thinking, wait, I can either make a lot of money or serve the God that is the romantic relationship, but I can't serve both gods. Yeah. And when you realize you get to serve the God that's over all of it, it's good. And he gives all of it. And when I had that recognition, because remember, I struggled with this for the longest time. And when you understand, like when God calls you to something, he sustains you in that call. So if he sustains you to be a wife, he's going to give you what you need to do that as you build your business, as you make it. And what you were saying about like with your boyfriend being a partner that makes you better, I mean, heck yeah, it's 2 whole people in Christ coming together to make a bigger impact for him than they could as individuals. And I just think that's so amazing. So question for you on, this is just something that's come up time and time again. When you were in the process of like, before you, what's your boyfriend's name? Can you say his name? Duncan. Before you met Duncan, I feel like a lot of women are confused on the messages of this world. One says it will happen when you're least expecting it. The other says if you want it to happen, you have to intentionally seek a good Christian man. What do you think on that? What's your story? I mean, I don't know if there's an answer here, but I mean, that's a very common question I'm getting.
I have an answer. I think I give Duncan I give him a hard time because he knows. So Duncan I was his first girlfriend, like never dated anybody. He's like a little bit older than me. He has the best family. He just, had never really been interested. He just he'd been whole his whole life. He's never like looking for any relationship necessarily, but always like knew, like maybe. I always give him a hard time because our story's a little interesting because I had to push a little harder in the beginning. But I again, my pastor taught me about this, and I'm really like, I land on both ends of the spectrum. My opinion is that one, like above everything, if you desire marriage or to be a wife, people have said this a lot, but it is actually so true that like you need to be the person that if you have a high standard, you have to ask yourself, like, does somebody of that standard like really want to date me? You know? And it was interesting, like I actually met Duncan like at, kind of like in the middle of my really hard season. And so like at the time, you know, I was a Christian, I was being really faithful, but I was really in like kind of a rut. And so I was like, you know, I was like also like figuring out where my theology was at. I was just in a very interesting time of life. So, and he really has kind of like had his stuff together like since he's been in LA. And so it was interesting. I like kind of had a crush on him from the beginning. And he wasn't not interested in me, but I think he just didn't like think, not that I was good enough, but it was just I was in a tough spot. So he was kind of seeing this like interesting. I didn't really know who I was yet. I was figuring it out. I just moved to LA or just moved to California like 6 months in, having a really hard time. So he kind of caught me in my like, I don't know what I'm doing either. And he didn't tell me this. We've talked about it later. But over time, like I really, again, got into community, found like really like nailed down my theology, figured out my relationship with the Lord. And at that point, I was like, God, here's where I'm at. I really desire a husband and I really want to be a wife. And you can ask my best friend. I did not want that for a while. I was like, I like being single. It's the best. But then like I prayed and was like, God, if this is a desire you have for me, like put it on my heart. And like, I really deeply felt that desire shift. And so I was like, you know what, Lord, like I'm going to be open. Like if a guy asks, I also believe, girls, if a guy asks you on a date and he knows Jesus, you should say yes. I just.
Okay, I love you said that. I agree with that too,
yes.
Ladies. My rule is if a guy has the balls, I'm gonna say that. If a guy has the balls to ask you out, say yes. Just to one coffee.
You
one.
Never know. You never know. Yeah, and if he doesn't know Jesus, it doesn't count. You can be like, hey man, I'm looking for something else. But really, if a believer, no matter what he looks like, no matter like what he might be, what his hobbies are, say yes. So that's how I land. So I had always said, you know, if a guy asks me out and he loves the Lord, I will say yes. I will always. That's how I've been. So I knew that going into like last year, and it was really this time last year. It's been almost a year, and I really started praying in June. I was like, you know what, Lord, I think Duncan's like the godliest guy I know. My pastor JP too is like, who is the godliest girl or the godliest guy you know? And why aren't you dating them if they're single? Like who is the most godly guy or girl you know that's single? And why aren't we willing to date them? Like, is it a selfish reason? Like, are you like, is it a like, I'm not attracted to them? Well, really, like if they're the godliest person you know in your life, why are you not willing to at least explore it? You know, that just doesn't make sense. And so like you're obviously not attracted to what God's attracted to. So I like asked myself, I was like, okay, God, like Duncan is like one of the godliest guys I know. I'm just gonna pray about it. So I took the summer. I was like, we actually got a coffee. I asked him to coffee. And he would tell you now he was nervous. Like he was nervous. So we got 4-hour coffee. So I was like, maybe he'll ask me on a date. He didn't ask me on a date. And so he didn't ask me on a date. And it's a long story. There's so many things, but pretty much at the end of the summer, I went to him. We spent a lot of time together, like just in groups. And that was the only time we ever got one-on-one, like only groups. Nothing ever happened. And I went to him right before he was about to leave for like a month for a trip. And I said, we went on a walk. I was so nervous. I was like, hey, this is like what I would urge girls to do is, hey, girls, if there's a guy that is actually like the godliest guy you know, and you like think like it's worth it. Like I walked with him and I said, you love the Lord and you love movies and you have a great family. And I would love to get to know you. Like I would love to learn more about you if you're interested in that. But if you're not, that's okay. Cause I also think like women, the 2 things I tell women is 1, you have to know what you're looking for. So like I knew that I was looking for someone that loves the Lord, that was like somewhat creative and really optimistic, you know, had the same dreams and really like driven and like had the same goals as I did. And I saw all of those things. And there's a couple other things, but like saw all of those things in Duncan. And I said, you know what? He is the closest thing to what I'm looking for that I've found so far. So I'm going to double down, you know? And if he turned me down, it was like, great, I can move on. Either he says, can I take you on a date? Or he says, hey, Carlie, you're awesome, but I just only see you as a friend. That's a win, because now you get to go and have more opportunity to find whoever that other person is. And you don't just wait and wait and wait. And eventually he came around and he asked me on a date, and he took me out and he asked me to be, and he really came around, and it worked out. But it took time. And so what I tell everyone is like, you have to know what you're looking for though, or how would you know if you found it? You know, how will you know if like, you know, and there's a lot of guys that could be like Duncan. Like, he's not the only one, right? Like, he's not the only person on the planet I could date, but there's, you know, few of them. And I was like, he's really what I'm looking for. So I'm going to put my time and effort into this person. And when other people came around, I was like, okay, like, you're not bad. Like, you're a great guy, but like, you're not what I'm looking for. So anyway, and nobody else asked me out. Also, I would have said yes, but nobody else asked me out.
I'm just cracking up. But I think what I'm hearing is there's so many parallels in your advice when it comes to relationship advice and what we talked about with work and going after your dreams and faith. Like, just how you detach from outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know what Duncan was going to say. You didn't know how Zeal Studios was going to go when you started streamed it up. You didn't know what moving to LA was going to be like, but you detached from outcome and you walked in faith. You walked in faith. You didn't just dream it up. You didn't just think about it. You actually executed on it. And that comes from detaching from the outcome and being obedient. That, and it's like understanding that it takes time. Like you said with Duncan, it's taken some time with work. It's taken some time. There's been areas of maybe, you know, you're like, I don't know what to do here. I have questions here, but you wait it out. And then, you know, mentioning how girls need to know what they're looking for kind of goes back to what we talked about with your boundaries. Knowing before you go, knowing before you go to work what your boundaries are, knowing before you get into a relationship what your boundaries are. And I just have to reiterate this for women listening that are like, okay, I'm gonna go ask out those people. It's like Carlie was like in love with his character. His character, who is the godliest guy you know. And that's what I think is so, it's not like, let's go ask out the hottest guy we know. Let's go ask out the most successful guy we know. It's, no, who is the godliest person I know? Okay, God. And if there's, you know, previous communication, or else it'd be a little weird. But like, okay, God, like, give me the strength to make it known I'm interested. Give me the strength to make a move. But first, it's like identifying the character you want. And I think that's just so on spot.
Well, and I also prayed for a month. I said he was leaving. We both left for a month. And I said, okay, God, like, I'm going to take the month. We're not going to talk, nothing. And if I still feel this way, this was like over a year ago, like in May, I was like, if I still feel this way, I'm going to start praying about it, and maybe I'll say something. But the other thing is, it's like, I don't rush into these things. I knew him for like 6 months before I said anything. And at the back end of it, after I said something one time, I told myself, I am not making any more moves. That was my card. I said, I have done everything I need to do. It is in the Lord's hands and in his hands. And I remember there was a moment I was about to move on. I was about to say, God, I just think it's time. I just think, you know, I was not going to stay hung on for too long. And I prayed and I said, this, you can't make this up. You can read my journal. I said, God, if Duncan is supposed to be in my life, he needs to ask me out this week. Like 5 p.m. on Friday, I'm out. I'm moving on. You want to know what happened? He asked me out at 6 p.m. on Friday, or 5 p.m. like literally that evening. We spent the whole day, and we went to see a movie, and he asked me out.
No, I love how I think people don't think they can ask God this kind of prayers. Like, God, I need you to respond by, and even David, like in the Psalms, he talked about, God, respond to me quickly. I need an answer quickly. You can ask that. I mean, and I love how you said that, because it reminds me of when you mentioned how you asked God, like, I'm giving you 6 months. I think it was when you were in LA and not sure. And you're like, maybe make it clear. Expect God to answer. Expect him to. And I love that. And I know we're coming up on time here. I'm going to wrap this up with the 2 questions that wrap up every single podcast episode, which is 1, what advice would you give your 10-year-old self? And 2, what advice would 10-year-old Carlie give 21-year-old Carlie?
I would give my 10-year-old self the advice to, 1, follow Jesus because I did not know Jesus when I was 10, but to also to never be afraid to take a chance, and that the craziest things in life often are the ones that don't make sense to anybody else. So don't be alarmed if it doesn't make sense to anybody but you. And then I think 10-year-old Carlie would probably encourage me to. I was just a rambunctious kid. I bet I would tell myself to not take life too seriously. And I feel like I'm fun and exciting, but I'm also so logistical and so, driven with goals and things, like very like analytical, like, oh, this many clients and this many things. It's like, no, like, don't take life too seriously, stay in the now. And I feel like I'm stepping into that this season. So I'm really excited.
I love that. It's funny because that's something that's been an intention of mine is keeping life fun.
Yeah.
I have a big like grinder side of me. I love to get work done. I love to achieve, but I felt recently God just saying, "Where's the fun?
Yeah.
Like, is this fun?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying it?" And it's just bringing. It's like having conversations like this. It's fun, and it brings the joy. Joy and work don't have to be opposite.
Yeah.
They don't have to be
totally
contradictory.
Totally.
It can be all embedded. And so, Carlie, thank you so much for your time, for just bringing light like you do to this audience, and just bringing your message, your value, your spirit, and just really appreciate you. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. You're the best. Thank you for having me.